Say hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our day.
Welcome to our day.
Good boy.
All day rock and roll.
That was the best.
So on to day 2 of the Advent calendar, and today is the Princess and the Frog. Oops, sliding. One evening, Tiana's mother read a story about a frog to Tiana and her friend, Charlotte LeBouf. The frog needed a princess's kiss to turn him into a human prince. Charlotte was ready to kiss a frog if it meant she could be a princess, but Tiana said she would never kiss a frog, whatever happened. Tiana's dream wasn't to be a princess. It was to open a restaurant with her father. She wished on the evening star to make their dream come true. Her father reminded her that she also had to work hard and never forget her family and friends. The years went by, and Tiana became a beautiful young woman. Her father had passed away, but she was still determined to open their restaurant. She waited tables day and night and saved every spare penny she could. She knew that her hard work would pay off and her dream would come true. Not far away, Prince Naveen arrived in town. Tiana's friend Charlotte was excited to meet him at her father's masquerade ball that night. Not far away, Prince Naveen arrived in town. Tiana's friend Charlotte was excited to meet him at her father's masquerade ball that night. "I'm going to need about 500 of your bayonets," she told Tiana, paying her a good price for them. Finally, Tiana had enough money to buy her restaurant. Tiana made an offer on the old sugar mill that she and her father had picked out long ago. "It will be the place Daddy and I always dreamt of," she told her mother. "Your daddy may not have got the place he always wanted," said her mother, "but he had love, and that's all I want for you, sweetheart." Tiana laughed. Love was the last thing on her mind. Meanwhile, downtown, a sinister figure approached Prince Naveen and his valet Lawrence. Dr. Facilier practiced bad voodoo, and he had wicked plans for the prince. He told them that he could give them exactly what they wanted and used a magic talisman to cast a spell. Voodoo magic transformed Lawrence so that he looked exactly like Naveen. The plan was for Lawrence to marry Charlotte, then split her fortune with Dr. Facilier. Meanwhile, at the ball, Charlotte was waiting impatiently for Prince Naveen to make his entrance. When the enchanted Lawrence arrived, she and Tiana both thought he was the real Prince Naveen. Things were going badly for Tiana. Someone had offered more money for the sugar mill, and the deal was off. Upset, she tripped into her beignet table and ruined her dress. Charlotte came to the rescue and gave her a beautiful gown to wear. Tiana looked up at the evening star, closed her eyes and made a wish. When she opened them again, a frog was staring up at her. "I am Prince Naveen of Maldonia," the frog said grandly. Dr. Facilier had turned Prince Naveen into a frog, and he thought that a kiss from a princess could turn him back again. He also thought that Tiana was a princess. Tiana felt sorry for the frog. Plus, she really did want her restaurant, and the prince had offered her a reward. She closed her eyes. Naveen was still a frog, but now Tiana was a frog too. Tiana was horrified. She tackled Naveen and they tumbled down to the ball, causing chaos. They grabbed some balloons and drifted away to the bayou. Naveen found out that Tiana was not a princess after all. "No wonder the kiss didn't work," he exclaimed. But he couldn't be too angry. He had lied about being rich. The next morning, Naveen and Tiana met a trumpet-playing alligator named Louis. He told them about Mama Odie, an old woman who used voodoo to help people, and agreed to take them to her. Maybe she would make Louis human too, and his dream of playing in a jazz band would finally come true. Meanwhile, Lawrence, disguised as Naveen, was already proposing to Charlotte, but the magic spell was running out. Charlotte was so thrilled at the idea of being a princess that she didn't notice Lawrence changing back into his true self. Back in the bayou, Tiana and Naveen tangled tongues while trying to catch a firefly. The firefly, Ray, kindly offered to light the way to Mama Odie's. Disaster struck when Tiana was captured by hunters, but Naveen bravely hopped to the rescue and Tiana escaped. At Mama Odie's, Tiana told her that she and Naveen needed to become human again. Tiana peeked into Mama Odie's tub of gumbo and saw an image of Big Daddy LaBeouf as the king of Mardi Gras, which made Charlotte a princess. If Naveen could kiss Princess Charlotte before midnight, he and Tiana would become human again. Tiana, Naveen, Louis, and Ray took a riverboat ride to the city. Along the way, Naveen realized that he had fallen in love with Tiana. As they drifted along, Tiana pointed out the sugar mill and told him about the restaurant. How could Naveen make Tiana's dream come true without marrying Charlotte? He didn't have the money to buy it himself. Heartbroken, he left Tiana and was snatched by Facilier's evil shadows. Back at the LaBeouf estate, the shadows swept in with Naveen. Facilier was thrilled. He used Naveen to restore the talisman's magic, and Lawrence changed into the handsome prince once more. Now Lawrence could marry Charlotte. Naveen finally understood the wicked plot, just as Facilier locked him inside a chest. Luckily, Ray soon freed Naveen. Just as Charlotte was about to get married, Naveen leapt onto Lawrence, pulled the talisman from his neck and tossed it to Ray. The spell was broken, and Lawrence had to hide. Meanwhile, Louis was finally playing in a jazz band when he spotted Ray struggling with the heavy talisman. Facilier and the shadows were right behind him. Louis turned his back on the band and rushed to help Ray. Ray gave Tiana the talisman, then flew off to fight Facilier and the shadows. But Facilier knocked down the little bug and stepped on him. Facilier caught up with Tiana. He tried to stop her from shattering the talisman by offering her the chance to be human again and own her dream restaurant. "Don't forget your poor daddy," Facilier said. "My daddy never got what he wanted," Tiana said. Suddenly she understood everything, but he had what he needed. Her father knew that the love of his family was more important than anything. She shattered the talisman. Instantly, she was a frog again, and Facilier lost his control over the shadows. They surrounded him. Soon, all that was left of Facilier was his hat. Meanwhile, Naveen was promising to marry Charlotte if she kissed him, as long as she gave Tiana money to buy the restaurant. Tiana hopped out of the shadows. Charlotte could see that the two frogs were in love. She kissed Naveen so that he and Tiana could be together, but it was too late. The clock struck midnight. Tiana and Naveen were still frogs, but they were together. Just then, Louis raced up, holding a wounded Ray. Facilier had hurt Ray badly. He was dying. Tiana and Naveen stayed by his side. Ray was happy to see that his friends were together and in love. Then, his light flickered out. Returning to the bayou, the friends said goodbye to the little firefly. Naveen and Tiana were married by Mama Odie. As Naveen kissed Tiana, something truly magical happened. The frogs turned back into humans. Like I told you, kissing a princess breaks the spell, Mama Odie said with a laugh. And once you became my wife, that made you, Naveen began. A princess, Tiana finished. Soon, there was a new restaurant in town, Tiana's Palace. It was the best place to go for good food, lively music, and fun. Tiana had nothing more to wish for. She had everything she'd ever wanted, and everything she needed. The end. Day 3. Honour for Father. It was nearly time for the tournament of the Imperial Courts and Mulan's father's birthday. Mulan dreamed of winning the prized scroll. It would make the perfect gift. "Father, do you think I will win?" she asked Farzu. "Mulan, the correct question is, will you honour our family by doing your best?" He smiled, and Mulan smiled back. But another question bothered her. What if she did not? Early the next morning, Mulan practiced with her friends. "Hold still, Mushu," Mulan said, aiming her arrow. "Can we fight too?" Mushu asked. "Cricky says he can take down the others with one flick of his feelers." "Thanks, guys, but I have to do this on my own," Mulan said. "The other warriors will be bigger than me, stronger too. If I'm going to win, I'll need to outsmart them." "Just stay alive," Mushu said, smiling. "I'll see you at showtime." Finally, it was time to start. As the crowd gathered, Mulan caught a glimpse of her family in the stands. Her father gave her a nod. Mulan remembered his advice. Do your very best. The Master of Ceremonies welcomed everyone and explained the rules. Each warrior will battle one opponent at a time. The winner advances to the next round. All matches must take place within the circle. Stepping out of bounds results in disqualification. Archery was the first event. Upon hearing Mulan's name, Mushu led the Fa family cheering squad in a rousing chant. The crowd burst into applause. Then, the Master of Ceremonies announced Mulan's competitor, Su Mei Ti. Mulan frowned. Su Mei Ti was intimidating. Just then, the gong rang. The competitors sent apples into the air using their kickstands, then released arrows to hit them into the target. Su Mei Ti was good, but Mulan used a bit more creativity. Rather than aiming for a straight line, Mulan made a smiley face on the target board. Fortunately, her cleverness was rewarded. Fa Mulan wins, announced the Master of Ceremonies. Mulan's father nodded with approval. Maybe this will be Father's best birthday yet, she thought. Next, Mulan battled with staffs against Pao Erfu. Mushu rallied the crowd with another cheer, but in all the excitement, he almost fell into the circle. The crowd gasped. Mulan hesitated, and Pao seized his opportunity. Pao threw his staff directly at Mulan. She quickly ducked, turned, and split Pao's weapon in half. The crowd oohed. Mulan had won! That was close, she thought. Mulan could not let Mushu break her concentration again. Battle after battle, Mulan defeated every warrior who came her way. The scroll was almost hers. Now there were just two competitors left, Mulan and Wan Napu. Wan was the fiercest competitor of all time. For the final round, the warriors chose their weapons. Wan revealed two tridents. Mulan took a deep breath, then brandished the sword of Shan Yu. Bong! The gong rang, and the battle began. Mulan quickly realised that on the ground, Wan's size and skill overshadowed her, but balance was her advantage, so she jumped up onto a pole. From there, she matched his every move. As the fighting intensified, so did Mushu's cheer. Mulan's friends formed a tower with Mushu on top. The noise from the crowd swelled. Mulan raised her sword. Father's birthday will be perfect, she thought. But then, everything went wrong. Mushu lost his balance, sending him, little brother, and Cricky flying towards the ring. To make matters worse, Wan's trident was heading right for them. "Mulan, help!" cried Mushu. All thoughts of winning left Mulan's mind. She had to save her friends. Mulan chopped down a beam and hoped it would block the trident. It worked. Wan's trident hit the pole instead of the animals, but in all the excitement, Mulan made a big mistake. Fa Mulan has stepped outside the circle. She is disqualified. Wan Napu wins, the master of ceremonies announced. After the tournament, Mulan sat with her father once more. "Defeat was not the gift I wanted to give you for your birthday. I lost the tournament and our family's honour," she said sadly. Day 4. Cinderella. Once upon a time, Cinderella lived with her father and stepmother, who had 2 daughters of her own, named Anastasia and Rosella. The stepsisters were mean. When Cinderella's father died, her stepmother stopped pretending to like her. Cinderella was given a tiny bedroom in the attic and was forced to become a servant in her own home. Her only friends were the birds and mice. One morning, Cinderella found a mouse caught in a trap. "We'll call you Gus," she said, setting him free. "Don't forget to warn him about Lucifer," she told the other mice. Lucifer was her stepmother's cat. All the animals hated him. Cinderella gave Lucifer his milk and went into the garden. "Breakfast time," she called, scattering corn for the chickens. The mice came running for some breakfast too, but Lucifer was blocking the way. One of the mice crept up to Lucifer and toppled him into his milk. This made Lucifer very angry. When he saw Gus gathering up some of the corn, he pounced. Gus had a narrow escape, but he managed to hide under a teacup in the kitchen. A voice shrieked from upstairs, "Cinderella!" "I'm coming," Cinderella sighed. She picked up the breakfast trays and made her way upstairs. Under the teacup, Gus was safe at last. Not far away, in the royal palace, the king and Grand Duke were talking about the prince. "It's time he married," said the king. He decided to hold a ball and invite every young woman in the kingdom. The prince would surely fall in love with one of them. Invitations were sent out that day. "There's going to be a ball at the palace," exclaimed the stepmother when she read the invitation. "Every young maiden is to attend." "Why, that means I can go too," said Cinderella hopefully. "I see no reason why you can't go, if you get all of your work done," her stepmother said. Cinderella rushed upstairs to find something to wear. Cinderella took out one of her mother's old gowns. It was a little old-fashioned, but she could fix it. "Cinderella!" shrieked her stepmother. "I'm coming." Cinderella sighed. The mice knew that poor Cinderella would never have time to finish the dress, so they worked on it themselves. They sang merrily as they cut and sewed, and at last the pretty dress was finished. It was trimmed with an old sash and beads that Anastasia and Drizella had thrown away. Cinderella hadn't had time to get ready. She watched a carriage arrive to take her stepmother and stepsisters to the ball. Then she saw the dress. "Surprise!" cried her friends. Cinderella Cinderella could hardly believe her eyes. She put the dress on and rushed downstairs to the carriage. When Anastasia and Drizella saw their stepsister looking so beautiful, they were jealous. "Why, you little thief!" Drizella screamed, spotting her old beads around Cinderella's neck. Then Anastasia looked at the sash. "That's mine!" she cried, grabbing the sash and ripping the dress. "Please stop!" cried Cinderella, but her dress was ruined. She ran into the garden sobbing. There was a magical swirl of light, and when Cinderella looked up, an old lady was sitting on the bench. "I'm your fairy godmother," the lady said kindly. "Dry your tears. You can't go to the ball looking like that. Now fetch me a pumpkin and hurry. Even miracles take time." The fairy godmother waved her magic wand, and the pumpkin changed into a sparkling carriage. Next, she waved her wand over Gus and the other mice, and changed them into white horses. Another wave of the wand, and Cinderella's horse was changed into a coachman, and Bruno the dog became a footman. With a final wave of her wand, Cinderella was dressed in a magnificent ball gown and delicate glass slippers. It was like a dream come true. "Remember, you only have until midnight," the fairy godmother warned. "On the last stroke of 12, the spell will be broken." When Cinderella entered the glittering ballroom, the prince knew that she was the girl of his dreams. He led her to the dance floor. In the prince's arms, Cinderella felt as though she was floating on air. Just then, the clock chimed the first stroke of midnight. "I must go," Cinderella gasped as she fled through the ballroom and down the palace steps. "Wait, you can't go now," cried the prince, but Cinderella didn't stop. Even when she lost one of her glass slippers on the steps, she leapt into the carriage, which raced away. On the last stroke of midnight, the carriage turned back into a pumpkin, and Cinderella's dress became rags, but she still wore a single glass slipper. Back at the palace, the prince was heartbroken. He said he would marry only the girl whose foot fit in the glass slipper that he had found. The next day, the search began. Every young woman in the land would have to try on the slipper. Meanwhile, the stepmother had noticed that Cinderella was humming music from the ball. She was determined that her stepdaughter should not try on the glass slipper and locked her in her room. At last, the Grand Duke arrived with the glass slipper. Reading from a royal decree, he stated that the owner of the glass slipper is the true love of the prince. Anastasia and Drizella tried to squeeze their feet into it, but it was far too small. The mice were desperate to help Cinderella. They took the attic key from the stepmother's pocket and unlocked the door. Just as the Grand Duke was about to leave, Cinderella appeared. "Please wait," she called, but the stepmother tripped up the footman. He dropped the slipper and it shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. Cinderella took the other glass slipper from her pocket. Her stepsister shrieked as the delighted Duke fitted the slipper onto Cinderella's foot. Soon afterwards, Cinderella and the prince were married. Her friends, the mice, looked on and smiled. Cinderella's dreams had finally come true. The end.
Oh, you made it through the 3 books.
This is not true, Fazu said. Mulan, you are brave and smart, and most important, you saved your friends today. This is the behavior of a true Far warrior. I am honored to be your father. He picked a blossom and placed it in Mulan's hair. I do not need a scroll for my birthday. You are my greatest gift. The end.